Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Lost City in the Jungle. Researchers discovered a mysterious lost city high up in the mountains of Colombia's Sierra Nevada. This is an isolated mountain range deep in the jungle near the Caribbean coast. It's around the same area as the infamous Ciudad Perdida, literally lost city in Spanish, which is another ancient jungle dwelling, but this one has no name. The ancient settlement was found 5,000 feet above sea level, hidden underneath dense jungle foliage. It was only found thanks to National Geographic explorer Albert Lynn, who used light detection scans to see through the vegetation to the ruins beneath. These are known as LiDAR scans, which send hundreds of thousands of laser pulses across the ground to create a 3D map of a place's topography. This is what allows researchers to see man-made structures that would normally be invisible. It's now believed this city was founded around the year 800 AD, then abandoned a few centuries later when the Spanish arrived in South America. It was likely the mysterious civilization known as the Tairona who built this city. They once lived across a huge part of the Caribbean coast and had countless forest dwellings in the mountains, some of them 18,700 feet high. But not much is known about the Tairona except for their crumbling ruins and thousands of gold artifacts. The Tairona were extremely talented goldsmiths. Once the Spanish arrived and began their campaign of thievery, occupation, and death, the Tairona abandoned most of their cities and slowly vanished. Number 9. Lost Cities of the Maya. Archaeologists used remote surveying technology to look through the thick canopy of forest in Guatemala and discover both lost cities and ancient structures. These lost cities were once populated by the Maya civilization, and these discoveries make it pretty clear the Maya were a lot more spread out than previously thought. Sure, they had some pretty big settlements in Mexico, and some that have already been found throughout Guatemala. But with this most recent discovery, researchers now know they lived in just about every region of the jungle from southern Mexico to Costa Rica. Just like with the lost city in Colombia, experts used LiDAR scanning to identify over 60,000 ancient structures. These structures represent a network of cities, highways, military fortifications, and farming communities. The extent of the Maya civilization is mind-boggling, with an agriculture system on an industrial scale unlike anything else in the ancient world. In total, researchers documented 772 square miles of the Guatemalan jungle. Before this new information, experts believe the Maya population in the lowlands here to have been between 1 and 2 million. Now, researchers believe there could have been as many as 20 million people spread throughout the jungles of Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize. The population steeply declined around the year 900. This was when drought decimated the agricultural network and people left the cities since they no longer had food or water. Many of the cities, even those located in the dense Guatemalan jungle, were left overnight. They may be nothing but overgrown ruins now, but otherwise are still exactly as they were when the Maya packed up their things and fled in search of a more stable environment. Number 8. The world's first city. An archaeological breakthrough using spy satellites has revealed what some are calling the world's first city. The discovery can actually be traced back to the Karon program in the 1950s. This was during the Cold War period, when Americans started using satellite technology to keep an eye on places like the Soviet Union and China. The program continued into the early 70s and was declassified by President Bill Clinton in 1995. The images have since been made available to the public and have become the source of great fascination for archaeologists. There are over 860,000 detailed images of the Earth's surface, and in some of them are mysterious archaeological wonders. Dr. Jessie Kasana has been studying the photographs for years, focusing particularly on photographs of the Middle East. Jessie says the photos are invaluable because when they were taken 50 years ago, the countryside was far less industrialized. This means that ancient settlements and structures hadn't yet been destroyed or built over by modern technology. Jessie has documented over 10,000 archaeological sites, many of which are no longer visible. The biggest discovery comes in the form of a city estimated to be roughly 4,000 years older than the Egyptian pyramids. This city is called Tel Brak. It began life in the 7th millennium BC and grew to be one of the biggest cities in Mesopotamia. It grew from a primitive village to an urban hub, and then into a giant city of 55 hectares. Tel Brak continued to expand, and its name changed several times. However, it was eventually abandoned and forgotten. Archaeologists are calling it the first city because it was one of the very first major metropolises that sprang up in Mesopotamia in the dawn of human civilization. Number 7. Mysterious Aksum Empire. In 2019, a town was uncovered in Ethiopia that had been abandoned for centuries. The lost city was inhabited for 1,400 years before it was forgotten, originally built by the mighty civilization of Aksum. At its peak, the Aksumite Empire dominated East Africa and was just as powerful as its counterparts in China, Persia, and Rome. It was one of the most important civilizations that has been lost to time. Outside of Egypt and ancient Nubia, Aksum was the earliest complex society in Africa. It maintained control over the region until power slipped through their fingers in the 6th century as Islamic powers began to invade. By the 10th century, they had been forced from their land, and the last king was betrayed by his general, creating his own empire. That was also around the time the newly discovered city was lost. Archaeologists stumbled upon the remains of its stone buildings by accident near the town of Beta Samati. There were a few small buildings here, mostly residential, but a handful of workshops too. Researchers also found a basilica that likely functioned as a public administration building, but it may have also been a place of Christian worship in the 4th century. This lost city is a reflection of what happened to the world power of Aksum as the empire fell in its final years. Number 6. The city of the flesh-eating illness. In the Central American country of Honduras, a group of archaeologists trekked deep into the forest to uncover a lost and never-before-explored city. Explorers have been marching in the jungles for centuries, looking for proof of lost civilizations, but this time they actually found what they were looking for. The research team discovered what they believe to be the remains of the legendary White City. It's so deep in the jungle that getting there is an absolute nightmare. Not only did archaeologists have to deal with the dangers of drug cartels moving through the area, but they had to contend with deadly monsters as well. The Honduran jungle is filled with venomous snakes, dangerous forest creatures, and flesh-eating parasites. Sure, the team discovered an overgrown ruin that hasn't been touched in hundreds of years, abandoned by a civilization we don't even know the name of, but they also contracted flesh-eating parasites. All dangers aside, this is a remarkable part of Central America. Researchers also identified a complex cave system running beneath the jungle, which has never been explored or even entered by modern humans. The whole area is bursting with hidden history. It's just so hard to reach that so far, archaeologists have only managed to visit a single site, and even then they almost died. Do you think it's worth being infected by flesh-eating parasites to discover an ancient lost city? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Number 5. Dur Sharouken. Dur Sharouken can be found in modern Iraq, but was constructed long ago when this part of the world belonged to the Assyrian Empire. The city was commissioned during the reign of King Sargon II to be the greatest in the world. This was just shy of 3,000 years ago in 717 BC. The city grew to 1 square mile and was surrounded by a wall 45 feet thick and 40 feet tall. That's a pretty impressive wall even by today's standards. Plus, Sargon designed an amazing palace and a 4-tiered pyramid known as a ziggurat. But here's where the great Assyrian king failed majorly. Apparently, nobody liked his new city. He moved into his palace in the year 706 BC, only to die later that year during a military campaign. Almost immediately after his death, the people left the city en masse and it was abandoned. It was then lost to time until archaeologist Paul-Émile Botta discovered it in the shifting desert of Iraq in 1873. Number 4. Lost Golden City. Archaeologists in Egypt discovered a lost city described as the most significant find in a century. It's 3,000 years old, called So'ud Atun. Zahi Hawass, arguably the most famous Egyptologist in the world, announced the discovery himself. This city was probably established during the rule of the great pharaoh Amenhotep III, sometime around 1391 BC. Archaeologists have identified a bakery, an administrative district, a residential area, and thousands of everyday items scattered throughout the site. It's crazy that nobody found this city before, considering where it is. It's located near the Colossi of Memnon, the Ramesseum, and the Madinat Habu Temple. There is no way archaeologists should have missed it, yet somehow they did. Now it's a matter of figuring out what was happening in this town 3,000 years ago. Right now, it's believed Amenhotep commissioned the city himself, only to have his son abandon it for a new capital called Amarna. This was a major problem in ancient Egypt, with the rulers simply making their own capitals and completely uprooting cities that were already established. However, archaeologists aren't sure yet if people ever returned to Saud Atun. We know the capital of Amarna was abandoned shortly after the death of Amenhotep's son, but not what happened here in the following years. Judging by the state of things, it looks like people left in the middle of the night and never bothered going back to their homes. Number 3. An ancient Akkadian city. A lost Mesopotamian city from 4,000 years ago was discovered by archaeologists in Iraq. Researchers from France digging in Kurdistan found the ruined bones of a city that once belonged to the very first empire in Mesopotamia. I'm of course talking about the Akkadians. According to Christine Kapinski, one of the experts who's been excavating the site since 2012, nobody was expecting to find a full city. They were working at the Kunara site through 5 different excavations, researching things like farming, irrigation, and agriculture in ancient Mesopotamia. But then they began to find large stone foundations. The more they dug, the more they started to realize this was a city, not just a collection of random settlements. Researchers now know the ruins belong to an unknown metropolis, inhabited by mountain folk of the Akkadian Empire. That's the oldest empire in the entire world. Archaeologists even found clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform writing at the site, the oldest system of writing on the planet. It should be noted that the civilization of Sumer came before the Akkadians, but the Akkadians were the first actual empire. Sadly, the city has been very badly damaged. It's also covered in dirt and difficult to study. Archaeologists believe it was probably a prosperous city, thanks to the discovery of some rare stones like obsidian. But other than that, they know very little about this incredible find, not even its name. Number 2. The lost city of Karon. The ancient city of Karon has been called the Machu Picchu of Tajikistan. Looking at pictures, it's not hard to see why. The city was built high up in the mountains, and there is not much left today except stone ruins, and the landscape is almost identical to the Andes in Peru. Even though Tajikistan is in Central Asia and Peru is in South America, most people probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two snapshots without additional information. At least not snapshots comparing the Andes Mountains to the Pamir Mountains. These mountains are so remote that the ancient city of Karon remained lost until just a few years ago. The region has a population density of just 1 person for every square mile. There are no major roads here, and people live simple lives. This sparse population and humble lifestyle of the local people led to the ruins remaining forgotten until 2012. It was archaeologist Yusufsho Yukubov who first examined a strange structure of mud brick near the town of Kalai Kum. The fragments of brick turned out to be the only surviving pieces of an ancient Zoroastrian water temple. The water temple dates back to the 2nd millennium BC, when it was a feature of a hilltop city called Castle Karon. Sadly, we don't know much about the city's history. We know the Pamir Mountains are dotted with similar ruins, though most have been destroyed due to natural erosion and disasters. Up to 10,000 people may have lived in Castle Karon, members of a great mountain people who are long gone. Number 1. Balasagoon. The modern nation of Kyrgyzstan was once one of the most important places in all the ancient world. It was a major stop on the legendary Silk Road, the trade network running from the Far East in China all the way to the Mediterranean. But not only were goods shipped along the route, so too were people of various cultures. It was a big time for the world, with humans learning more about other people living in faraway lands and the way they behaved. In any case, almost all archaeological sites in Kyrgyzstan can be connected to the Silk Road. One of these is the lost city of Balasagoon, though it's not so lost anymore. The only remaining feature of the city is something called a minaret, a large tower about 75 feet tall. Not a single other piece of the city is still standing, and not even the full tower is left. The city of Balasagoon was founded 1,000 years ago by a group of people known as the Black Khans, or the Karakanids. They ruled a vast empire from the border of China to the Aral Sea, and Balasagoon was their capital. But in 1218, the Mongol horde showed up and destroyed everything. The Black Khans were defeated, and their city was left in disrepair. By the 14th century, just about 100 years later, the city was damaged even further by an earthquake. With the Silk Road in shambles, there was no reason for people to return. There were no more caravans, the world was changing, and the only thing that remained as a reminder of the power of Balasagoon was the Great Minaret. Thanks for watching! If you could see one of these lost cities when it was still in its prime, which one would you choose? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!